This week on Africa Update, Chadian opposition group threatens to set up parallel government as officials in Chad swear in General Mohamed Deby as transitional president, extending his stay in power by 2 years. We will take a look at why the democratic transition has failed in the Central African country. Also on the program, we'll bring you highlights from the annual Washington, D.C. Africa Festival, where Africans across D.C. gather to celebrate culture in a foreign land. Plus, our Africa Roundup, where we bring a recap of some of the biggest stories on the continent. This is Africa Update, reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. I am Ayuba Ilia. Welcome. Chad's military ruler, General Mohamed Deby, has been sworn in as the transitional president, extending his stay in power by 2 years. General Deby was appointed by the army as the country's new leader in 2021, following the death of his father and the former president Idris Deby. The late president died after being shot as he battled rebels on the front line. Now, in a reaction to this, the vice leader of Chad's opposition group, the Transformers, Dr. Ndelebai Njesada, has described this latest development as a regression in democracy, as he says that the opposition groups have given the general until mid-October to step aside or they will form a parallel government. Here is a look at the journey of Chad's political transition in the past decades.
The political instability in Chad can be said to be as old as the republic itself, given the country's battle with rebel forces since its early years of independence from France. In the mid-1960s, two guerrilla movements, the Front for the National Liberation of Chad and the smaller Chad National Front, ushers a barrage of rebel groups seeking political control. The early movements aimed to overthrow the existing government, reduce French influence in Chad, and have a closer association with the Arab states of North Africa. With several armed groups fighting for the control of the Central African country, the armed forces of the north, led by Hissène Habré, took control of major towns in eastern Chad in November 1981. This led to the formation of a new government in October 1982 with Hissène Habré as president. In 1990, Idris Deby took over control from Hissène Habré, suspended the constitution and formed a new government with himself as president. Following the takeover, a national conference was held in 1993 to establish a transitional government, and Deby was officially designated interim president. In 1996, a new constitution was approved and Idris Deby was elected president in the first multi-party presidential elections held in Chad's history. With the signing of a peace accord in 2002 and 2003, fighting in Chad essentially ended for a few years. Also in 2003, years of planning and construction came to fruition when Chad became an oil-producing country. However, with the resumption of hostilities prior to Deby's re-election for a third term as president in 2006, much of the revenue from the oil industry was used for weapons to combat rebel offensives rather than the much-needed development. In addition to internal conflicts, fighting along the Chadian border with neighboring Niger, the Central African Republic, and Sudan led thousands of refugees seeking safety to relocate to Chad. As part of political reforms, the country's constitution was promulgated in May 2018 to allow for a 6-year two-term limit as against a 5-year term with no limit for the office of the president. Shortly after being declared winner in the April 2021 presidential election for his 5th term, Idris Deby was killed in a battle with rebels. But rather than following the constitution, which dictated that the president of the National Assembly should be named interim president, the military instead dissolved the government and National Assembly. After promising to cede power to civilian government after 18 months, the country has just inaugurated the son of the former president, Mohamed Idris Deby, as interim president for a 2-year transitional period. By the end of the 2-year period, Mohamed Idris Deby would have been president for 4.5 years.
All right, now to discuss this, I have Professor Usman Mohammed from the Center for Legislative Studies in Africa to give more perspectives to this issue. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor Usman Mohammed. All right, now the inauguration of Mahamat Derby appears to be a repeat of history. Can you give us your take on the extension of transition period in Chad?
Well, my take is a receipt for crisis, because a son has not been accepted wholeheartedly. When the father died, it was simple that the son should assume power on transition agreement. And there are other powerful plots on the ground that really needed to be cut off. Unfortunately, the Chadian crisis has gone far beyond ethnic and clan patronage and other military power domination. So it is not a need for unity. It is definitely going to create more disharmony in Chad, and also the military will not be a monolithic, one single entity that will serve the country. The father has fought well, and we have seen how he died in the front. If care is not taken, that war will continue, because the other powerful group will not agree.
Now, what do you think are some of the achievements, of the transitional government in Chad since it was formed, and why has the transition failed?
Now, in the transition, the gentleman on the seat of power need to have reached to every class, and also to have traveled along ECOWAS members countries, and also powerful countries in West African sub-region, like Nigeria, Ghana, and other stakeholders within the region. And also to have shown commitment to the fight against terrorism and the fight against Boko Haram. The multilateral agreement signed by his father has not received any backing from him yet. So where is the success? How could this head of state and government agree to back it up? Even if France, as it is, are backing him, they may not get the desired result in Chad. So I'm very sure he's in a total dilemma as to how to handle the crisis in Chad.
There seems to be a growing anti-France sentiment, in the continent right now as it is. How would you describe the role of France in what's happening in Chad?
France has been a country all along since Nigeria's independence that never wanted the unity of the African state. When you look at contagious neighbors of Nigeria are all French, and then you look at the civil war and the activity of France against Nigeria, and of recent, the support they give IPOB, financial support and political and moral support, you know that France does not mean well to Nigeria. Secondly, when you look at Mali coup came at a time they were disgusted with France's role and their security agency in Mali. And so they send them packing. In Burkina Faso today, we have a 35-year-old staff who has been disenchanted with France road and has cancelled about a colonial dominant economic exploitative zone that has been on in Burkina Faso since independence. Although Sankara tried at the time to uplift them, but he was assassinated by France support with his friend Campoir. So France does not mean well to Africa and especially with African countries and also the Sahelian states. Everybody, it's an open secret. Everybody knows that. So the best thing for the African countries is to solve their own problem. If you see the activities of France in ECOWAS countries, you will really know and you will start asking questions. Why are we supporting France in any way? Even in 2019, when the COVID came, West African countries, the ECOWAS countries came together to pool resources. Nigeria gave almost $2 billion. And France told all the West African countries surrounding Nigeria not to pool resources in Nigeria. So it asked all these French countries to gather their money in one against Nigeria, Ghana, and Sierra Leone. It happened during the COVID. And to cap it all, France never wanted Nigeria to succeed in ECOWAS Diaba project. In that project, there has been war against financial crime and money laundering in West Africa, established by Diaba, that is in Senegal. This same France asked all the French countries surrounding Nigeria not to support the financial intelligence unit that Nigeria brought as a proposal in financial institutions in order to change politically exposed politicians in West Africa. So France does not mean well to Africa.
So you are saying that.
I wonder why we are. Yes.
So you are saying that the anti-France sentiments that we have seen is justified. That's what you're saying.
It's justified. We have more to say against France, but we are not against France. We are against French sectionalism, racism, and also the lack of cooperation for all these West African states to develop, to unite as one.
With opposition groups in Chad currently threatening that they are going to set up a parallel government in the country, where do you see this going?
But I told you, I said that whatever the son of God is doing, a receipt for more Christ. I'm very sure the crisis will start if the AU does not step in strongly. It will create serious spillover effects in other neighboring countries such as Nigeria and Cameroon. So they need to come up with a plan, security plan, and then they need to have the chaff in power so that there could be stability and very sound political transition. But that's what we are seeing today.
Do you see this repeat? Do you see history repeating itself? After this 2 years transitional period, Mahamat Dabi is at liberty to contest for elections. And there's a likelihood of him contesting for election after this transitional period. So, so that's the same thing that happened with his father.
He is free. He is a citizen. He can contest. But if he tries transmitting to civilian dictator, you should remember how his father has went down. Nobody was happy how he went down because he was a gallant fighter for freedom. And he cannot be fictional. He should take lessons from this.
All right. Give us your take on the responses of the international community on what's happening in Chad at the moment and whether or not the reactions are enough to pressure Chad to, do the right thing.
Not enough until there is political will by the incumbent, the son of daddy, come out and sincerely also to take along all the sectional groups and distribute power so that they can have peace. And peace cannot be achieved without sincere negotiation on the table. And it must be built. When you look at the economic importance of Chad, you look at Nigeria's effort in taming the Boko Haram, the Lake Chad region, its economy, it will be an understatement to say that countries like Nigeria must be involved and other countries to stabilize Chad. So it is important.
Okay, but how will countries like Nigeria and others be involved? Recently, during the inauguration was boycotted by African leaders, by the AU and the ECOWAS. But we saw that President Muhammadu Buhari was there, and it looked like he was the only president that was there in actual sense. How should these neighbors be engaging with Chad? Is it by endorsing what Mohamed Dabi is doing, or how?
No. We have a strong regional organization to support. Nigeria is a major key player in ECOWAS. They can make Chad to be an observer. They can give Chad an observer status. Bring them into the organization and have a meeting with heads of states and government, and not dictate what they will do in Chad, but what they must do to democracy. So this way, the African leaders must open up, the regional leaders must bring close, both in ECOWAS, and then they must have a extraordinary meeting to AU and call him to order and bring so many economic leverage that he must block away France is doing nothing in Chad.
All right, thank you for your perspectives on Africa Update. We appreciate you. Thank you for joining. This is Africa Update coming to you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. Coming up after the break, we take highlights from the annual Washington, D.C. Africa Festival, where Africans across D.C. gather to celebrate culture in a foreign land. Join us again. Welcome back. Now, to understand, love, and preserve our common world heritage, it is important to learn about other cultures. This is among many reasons why the Mayor's Office on African Affairs in Washington, D.C. annually celebrates the African festivals. Here's a look at the highlights captured in this report.
They came from the four corners of Washington, D.C. to celebrate Africa. Various musical artists performed, among them Malian Sheikh Jabate.
I represent Africa, as I have always said. As an artist, the city of DC is growing. I have so many students here, children that I have mentored in music. We have worked so much, so for me, an event like this is very important.
We come for a very noble cause. As good African and good American, we really support the African diaspora and all our fellow Africans who are here to stand together for Africa.
According to the Washington Post, about 200,000 Africans live in the Washington, D.C. area. They are involved in various sectors, including restaurant, fashion, music, and dance. This festival also offers opportunities to talk about programs ranging from education, employment to health.
Investing in health is very important. Cancer is a problem that is very serious among immigrants. Cancer is present. Whether it's prostate cancer, breast cancer, it is there. So, for cancer, we know what the formula is. The earlier it is detected, the better it is treated.
The Mayor's Office of African Affairs has been hosting this festival every year since 2010 to give more visibility to the African community in the area and discuss how it can access local services and resources.
All right, thank you for staying with us. Now, let's take a look at the Roundup Africa for this week. Mali's junta leader, Colonel Assimi Goïta, received a draft of a new constitution, a key part of the military's bid to retain power in the crisis-hit country until 2024. The text of the preliminary draft constitution has not been made public and arrived 2 months after it was originally due, but the commission chair set up to write it said that the deadline had been extended. Malian authorities, dominated by the military, which seized power in August 2020, cite the drafting of a new fundamental law as one of the reforms needed for the foundation of the state. They announced the commission in June after extending military rule until 2024 and have said that the constitution will be put to a referendum in March 2023. The military has pledged under pressure to hold elections in February 2024 and to hand over power in March of the same year. In return, the regime secured an end to the sanctions imposed by the Economic Community of West African States. The United Nations General Assembly elected 4 African countries to the Human Rights Council for a 3-year term starting on January 1, 2023. The 4 African countries, which include South Africa, Algeria, Morocco, and Sudan, are among 14 nations who can now authorize inquiries. Others are Bangladesh, Belgium, Chile, Costa Rica, Georgia, Kyrgyzstan, Maldives, Romania, and Vietnam. Germany and Sudan also won second terms on the Geneva-based body, but South Korea and Venezuela failed to be re-elected. The 47-member council cannot make legally binding decisions, but its decisions carry political weight and it can authorize inquiries.
The following 14 states have thus been elected members of the Human Rights Council for the 3-year term of the office beginning of 1st of January 2023. Algeria, Bangladesh, Belgium, Chile, Costa Rica, Georgia, Germany, Kyrgyzstan, Maldives, Morocco, Romania, South Africa, Sudan, and Vietnam. The General Assembly will consider sub-item C of agenda item 117 for the election of 14 members of the Human Rights Council to replace those members whose term of office expires on 31st of December 2022.
Now, the death of 69 children from acute kidney injury in Gambia is linked to 4 cough syrups made in India and imported into the West African country via a US-based pharmaceutical company. the Gambian police said in a preliminary investigation report. The police report did not name Maiden directly, but listed the company's same 4 products that were mentioned by the WHO: promethazine oral solution, Cofex Maline baby cough syrup, Markov baby cough syrup, and Magrip in cold syrup. Atlanta-based Atlantic Pharmaceuticals Company Limited, which has permission to export medicines into Gambia, ordered a combined total of 50,000 bottles of those syrups, according to the police report. Health ministers from the 11 African countries met in Uganda over the recent outbreak of the Ebola virus disease in the East African country. According to the World Health Organization country office in Uganda, the ministers discussed a cross-border collaboration for preparedness and response to the Ebola disease. Uganda's Ministry of Health, which is a co-host with the African Union, Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and the WHO, said that the meeting is aimed at strengthening collaboration in response to the hemorrhagic fever and other public health emergencies. Now, the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, estimates that 54 African countries, accounting for more than half of the world's poorest people, now need immediate debt relief to avoid even more extreme poverty while giving them a chance of dealing with climate change. According to the findings of a new report published on Tuesday, the likelihood of a worsening outlook is high. Achim Steiner, UNDP administrator, urged a string of measures, including writing off debt, offering wider relief to greater numbers of countries, and even adding special clauses to bond contracts to provide breathing space during crisis. The UNDP's report also called for a recalibration of the G20-led common framework, the plan designed to help countries pushed into the financial trouble by the pandemic to restructure debt. And that's a wrap on Africa Update for this week. You can watch more via all our social media platforms. Don't forget, you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch us live. I am Ayuba Ilia. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.